Oh, yeah. Let's get it. It's 67. It's the first and only 67th episode. Thank you guys for being a part of this. We have Nick Vail on today's episode, and Nick Vail is an exceptional tricker. He had, a huge, hugely well-known, several years ago in the tricking community, has since moved into different areas, including astrophysics and philosophy, and we get into kind of all of that, and especially that transition between the two, which was, super insightful and something that I kind of share currently with my own sort of transition, so I think it's part of the conversation we've been having on the podcast here. I hope you guys found this valuable, and I certainly had a really good time talking with Nick and understanding what his was like. I mean, he had this insane, you'll hear he had this disastrous injury, and it almost, it literally almost killed him. So I hope you guys, it's just fascinating stuff. He learned a lot, and we really can't wait to have him back on. There was so much here to talk about with Nick, and just the state of the world, and kind of how things are changing, not just within our communities and for ourselves as individuals, but beyond all that. So I had a really good time. I'm really glad that I reached out to Nick, and I'm really even more glad that he decided to come on and be a part of it and share his story with you guys. So I hope you guys enjoy this one. If you want to check out the description, you'll find ways to support the podcast. You'll find ways to get in touch with Nick if you want to. And also thank you guys for being a part of the poll. We did a little Instagram post. So if you submitted a question, we really appreciate that. If you guys want to submit questions to our guests in the future, you'll follow us on the Instagram there. All right. That's enough from me. Let's get it with Nick Vail.
We did a survey of a few things.
Yeah, we didn't dive in deep. Well, first, I guess thanks for coming on and being a part of it.
Yeah.
I think we were just talking about, there's a bunch of things I think we could go over, but one of the first things that we started discussing that I think is relevant is just that, transitioning between an athletic run or some kind of like journey into what's after that.
Yeah.
And I think you had some really interesting insights on just like, we both shared this path or this seeking of learning.
Sure. I think that's a hallmark trait to people that do what we do, or did what we did, however you want to look at it. The movement art is a very unique experience for learning, and often, like we were saying, there's kind of a cross section in your life where you're kind of primed to learn from that, and sometimes it's a long time, sometimes it's a short time, and often if you're really passionate about it, it's hard to accept that your timeline is what it is, so
yeah. Can you talk about that? Like, what was your timeline like? Obviously a lot of people are going to know you from the tricking days. Like,
sure.
People that listen to this are mostly movement enthusiasts. Okay. There's parkour listeners, and we've had mostly parkour athletes as our, staple of guests, and like, we'll continue to do that.
Sure. So when I came out of similar sports to most trickers, in my era anyways, martial arts or gymnastics, something like that. I was a martial artist, and I supplemented it with gymnastics. I haven't thought about the timeline in a while. I was maybe 15 when I like really identified that I wanted to be a tricker, or just that I liked doing this stuff. And then tricking, I think, came a little bit later when I realized that you could do the tricks and not do the chopping and punching, and that they were different. And so that kind of came around 2007, 2008 for me. And then, I did what I was kind of conditioned to do. I tried to do college. I went in the military. I did, the white male
prescribed,
American
diet of a young man here.
Yeah, and that, and I found that those were not things that really resonated with me. And I started traveling due to tricking, and so tricking exposed me to a lot of cultures and belief systems and thought processes that I had never I had never even conceived it. I mean, it was it was a pretty solid dose of the you don't know what you don't know type situation. That was shocking for me. And so
where did you go? Like you were competing around the world, or were you just, there's a lot of tricking communities, I'm sure it's similar to parkour, where you travel just to meet up with just the homies that are thrown down in different parts of the world.
There was on Messenger, like MSN Messenger, and like forums and stuff is how we talked for Facebook. And the first event I went to out of state was in New York, the New York Tricking Gathering. The Mike McGuire and those guys put it on, and I had never met these guys. I had just seen some of their tricks, talked to them. They were forum names to me at the time. And I flew out there, and this was crazy to my parents. They were like, you're going to fly out to New York, people you've never met, you don't know where you're staying. I'm like, I think I'm staying in a garage. And they're like, doing what? And so this it was almost like my introduction into a nomadic life. That came from tricking. And so I traveled to New York a bunch of times, and I started traveling around the US. And then I pretty much stayed in the US while I was really training on tricking. And then I had an injury in 2013 that almost killed me, but I turned out okay. And then after that, I started traveling. I went to like Vancouver, I went to Germany, I went to France, I went to the Netherlands, I went through the Middle East. I went to Australia. I just did there was actually a one trip that circumnavigated the globe, which was really cool.
That's badass.
Yeah.
Sweet.
So that was like this, it was just an indoctrination into culture. And that was something that was really eye-opening for me. So that really kind of underpinned my whole tricking experience, was being exposed to new things and seeing how they fit in with tricking, because that was the thing that was the common thread. Everyone, we didn't really speak the same language usually, but we spoke tricking, and so we were still able to connect. And so
I mean, that is a language in its own right? Like these movement languages, I think that's definitely the way that they are perceived, and that's like why it's fun to speak with each other. You're just like, oh, sick, we both speak tricking or parkour or boxing or whatever it is.
So I finished. I think I didn't really have an official exit, but going back to school was kind of the line in the sand as far as my deep involvement in tricking. I have a peripheral involvement now, very peripheral.
Yeah.
So it's been almost 3 years, and I just went back to my first gathering because I had the time to. It lined up on a weekend where I could go, and I went to Trick Different in the Springs, which was awesome. So
what the line in the sand was just like, all right, I'm going back to school. Just, I know we talked about a little bit just like injuries and stuff, and just getting older. I hate to put any kind of like cap on it, because my genetics, whatever I'm gifted with, whatever I did to myself, the way I train and stuff, it's going to be completely different from somebody else. And I don't necessarily feel like I'm not incapable of doing some of the things that I used to do. It's just what do you think is, I think what we were getting at when we brought this up is just like, I think one of the biggest things I think you shared with me is that it's also just being drawn to continue your learning or continue that path forward. And it's kind of difficult, right? I mean, for me, it was difficult, and I'm not, again, same thing. Like, I'm not saying that I'm outside of the parkour community, but it's been a difficult transition to understand, okay, where does the learning happen? Because like my timeline where I was getting the most growth out of parkour, it's definitely changed now. This, like, I still want to be involved, and I still want to be, talking about things, and at least thinking about it and paying attention to the things that interest me in the community. But my growth as an athlete is not like a priority the same way it used to be. Right.
I mean, and that's a good point. The growth as an athlete, that priority changes, and I think also there's an identity piece to that, right? Like when we were trying to figure out who we were, I mean, more so than now, I think. Our identity was really tied to what we could do with our bodies, and I think that's a really raw form of learning.
Yeah.
You know, where your identity is, because you can express things with movement and art that we just don't have words for, right? Words are a little bit more precise way of describing things. And so the line in the sand for me, I think, was tied to that, was learning. And you know, I had a strong feeling about my some of the things that I believed as a kid, and tricking helped me identify that maybe I don't actually believe those, and I was maybe conditioned a little bit more by my environment to believe those. And so I sought new experience to help me rebuild a worldview, you know, one that was consistent with the way that you know, my intrinsic morals, what I thought was to be objectively moral about the world and the way that we should live as humans. And so I was so entrenched in tricking. This was something that was like really painful, was I was like in the thick of tricking. I had, you know, I was in the lifeblood of all of it. And, you know, I almost had I hesitate to say like the shave the head moment, but it was similar to that, where it was like almost like a burst of water in the face, and I just took a step back from it all and said, you know, I think it was very clear to me that I was no longer learning, and then I could see in the environment that there were things that were happening that were indicative of that I had stopped learning. And so I wasn't able to push to answer problems. I wasn't able to spark development of ideas in the people around me. And as soon as I realized that, I thought, you know, okay, this is my time to be done. And so I just said, you know, this is it, and I'm done. And, you know, some of it was life stuff. Like I met my partner now, and she's an incredibly high-powered woman. So, you know, you have to have a similar kind of energy to match that, you know? And she was, she helped kind of redirect some of the chaotic energy in my life into focus it into something. And school was my decision. She didn't, I don't actually think she said that it didn't make sense for me to go to school at the time. She's like, I think you have skills that you don't necessarily need to go to school, and you can still use them like most people do, develop from tricking. But, you know, I, as someone who's passionate about learning, I was like, well, you know, I don't know that until I try, right? And we'll see, you know, and it turned out that this is a place where I am thriving. It's an environment where I thrive. So I'm glad that I did push for that. So,
that's awesome. I think, I mean, you said it was difficult. Like, was there things that were like particularly difficult about it?
I think my environment, the familial piece of it, you know, the people that I was with, those were my family. I'd traveled with them. There was one of my buddies, Tuna, Santana Padilla, him and I one time just, we had to problem solve. We were in a kind of a nexus of events, and we had guests coming in and out of the state. We had to get one of the guests to California for loop kicks. And so we were like, all right, what do we do? And we exhausted all of our options. I had exhausted all of my options, and I was kind of talking through them, like, what do you think? You know, like, I don't know what to do. And, like, I mean, what do we do? Do we just like drive out to California? And he was like, yeah, that's what we do. And I was like, okay, that's what we're doing. And so, you know, we took 48 hours to drive out to loop kicks. We were there for a few hours. We dropped off Phil Gibbs and then drove back. And we just cannonballed the whole way. And it was, 24 hours either way. It was just like, I just told work, I was like, and they knew. They were like, things come up on gathering weekends. And so they knew. And I was like, I need to, I had like one class in the morning. I'm like, can we just have someone cover that? And they're like, yeah, you're good. And so we just like dropped it and went. And so things like that, are unique experiences, and they develop unique relationships. And so, by shifting focus, you also shift focus away from some of those relationships. And that was really hard. These are some of my best friends. Even now, these are some of the people that I do feel the closest with, even though I'm not as frequently in contact with them.
Yeah, 100%.
And that was hard, man.
Yeah.
That was hard.
No, I understand for sure. Like I've, as I've just personally, I've drifted into, just feeling like there's more things out here for me now than just within the realm of what I was athletic training every day, and let's go out and my exploration. Like what I loved about parkour is the learning and the exploration. You can explore the cities around you, the environments around you. I'm exploring different territory now in my own head and in like different domains, different communities. But yeah, that's huge, and one thing that I think is kind of unfortunate, I don't really see it so much anymore, but I think it was a thing for parkour athletes back. I mean, it's always going to be a thing because it's funny to talk shit sometimes, but but when people kind of make this, lots of athletes they seem to like drift off into the ether sometimes, from the community's perspective, or they seem to get into things that like, why don't they just continue pushing on this parkour path or this tricking path, and it's really hard from the inside, when you care that much about it, maybe to understand like what is going on. Right. And from the outside, like you might be, some of these people are getting lots of more or less, I guess, judgments about like, oh, you're abandoning or you're doing something with you're I don't know, just like putting their own whatever. Is it a projection? I don't know. Sometimes I don't know how to use it's not exactly a projection. It's like a kind of just, whatever their insecurity might be about like their own dedication to the sport, like out onto, some of these figures. And I don't know if you felt any of that, like as you were
100%
doing that. But yeah, I think even if you're, is there anything that you did to combat that, or is it just like you kind of have to
well, we all have our moments, our good and bad moments, and so there were some times when I met that with a similar type of hostility, and then there are other times when I met it with empathy, and I said, if I was in your position, that's what there was kind of a phase where it was a little bit rough when I was leaving, and and then I thought back on it and I thought, well, if I was in your position, I would likely feel the same way. And so there's like a degree of grace there where you're like, if I was that young in my tricking experience. In fact, there were times when I was young in my tricking experience and someone left and I was right along with them, like angry about him. Like, how could you leave us? I had such an emotional attachment to the guy that I watched YouTube videos of. This is the guy that I like woke up and studied like, technique and stuff. And then, you leave tricking, and that like, it's like when your favorite character dies in a TV series, you feel something about that. And so, I think empathy was kind of the answer later where, but also I think that's a step of the learning process. Empathy is not really something I was really taught. By my mother, yes, but by my father, no. And so that's like a weak muscle. It was a weak muscle at that time. And now I've spent a lot of time cultivating the idea of empathy and what that really means for me, and how to look at the world from someone else's perspective and put myself in their shoes before I make too much judgment about what's going on.
I think you touched something really important there. It's like that's something what I'm feeling right now too, and my own path. And I think what's fascinating about the athlete that makes the YouTube videos and skyrockets to some kind of like public stardom in some ways, or private, this community stardom, is because they have this addiction to learning, and like they're feeling the growth within themselves. They're feeling but they're also so focused on themselves to get better, can get increasingly better. I was listening to this guy in a martial arts class I was taking last night, talking to his people, and he was just saying like, the people that are often like stay in the community and or the great best coaches and stuff, for example, are not the superstar athletes, like the champions and stuff. They're often like so focused on themselves to get to like a certain part, to get to that competitive edge, that they don't have the empathy, or they don't have they're so singularly focused. And I think that's often what you discover. So like, oh damn, I'm really, you might even discover like I'm too focused on myself. I'm too like I want to grow into a more empathetic domain, or I want to grow, strengthen that muscle.
Yeah, I think anomalies in any sort of environment have anomalous, if that's the right word, characteristics, and like almost outlier characteristics. And I think you're right in athletics, you do find that people that have abnormal discipline or abnormal genetics, where they can just train longer than the rest of us can, or whatnot. Those are generally paired with a single-pointed focus.
Yeah.
And that single-pointed focus makes them seem very self-centered. And, to some degree, yes, they are. But also, maybe it takes that kind of focus to use that talent they have. And, and since it's abstract, it's not conventional, it's viewed as something mystic almost. And like I noticed that there's an athlete in tricking, when I was watching him come up in like 2007, 2008, Vail, he released a sampler called Homeless. And, I spent some time talking to him about what that sampler was. And when I ran into him at a few events, and he said, he was training almost twice a day, consistently for weeks. Nonstop. And he said the soreness just went away, and so he was doing what he said, like 14 tricking sessions a week. And the reason it was called Homeless was he just lived at the gym. He just stopped going home at sometimes. And I'm sure there's more to it, but that's what I took away from it. And that's what I remember, 10 years later almost. And this was a trait that he had, he had some sort of combination of emotional and mental fortitude and physical characteristics and opportunity to train. They all kind of came together for this moment of insight that really launched him forward. And I know some of the people, looking back on it, I've heard some commentary about how, he was maybe a little selfish at times. And I mean, maybe, but again, like we're saying, like this is a unique person, and the unique person has a unique play on life. And sometimes it might look really crazy, but that's just their expression. They're expressing the same characteristics in a different way. Everybody has limits to what they can do. And so that's just kind of something I've thought of in the past when thinking about the same, scenario about, was I being selfish? Was I, and yeah, to some degree, but, I was just doing the best I could with what I knew, so.
Yeah, 100%. And I think what's awesome is that, when you, these figures, like I'm not going to put myself on the chart or anything necessarily, but I'm just saying, like, I feel like understand both kinds of all kinds of people that bring a community and make a community what it is. And often some of these people that have this uniqueness about them and they're so singularly focused, they can give something to the community. Yeah, it's very selfish, but also they inspire a lot of people with that dedication, with that, almost obsessive kind of focus. Yeah. And it can show everyone what's possible, and it kind of like raises the bar. And often, these are the kinds of people that kind of show us, oh my God, like there's a whole other territories to look at.
Yeah, they're like, maybe we missed all of it.
We missed something. And yeah, but it can be exhausting, and like those people, like it's like this super giant star or something, and we might have to get into some astrophysics, or I don't know what your exact domain is, but the blue supergiants, like they burn hot and fast, they die and they explode fast as well. Whereas there's like some slow burners and stuff, and it's cool because we can look at black holes and stuff to see these guys explode or whatever. But it's nice that we have our more medium-sized stars, so we can all live and like have this perfectly inhabitable planet. There's beautiful things that happen in both of them. Right. And without the black holes, you don't have iron, or you don't have like heavy metals and stuff. We all need to play our part. It's not like any one of them is better. So it's hard to be like, he's selfish. It's like he's just doing his thing, like that's or her thing. Yeah, it's important. We all need that,
And this is maybe something that tricking makes. I think my experience in tricking made more sense looking back on it, not trying to project or like even see what was happening at the time, it was always made more sense in reverse, like looking back on things, the connections, how everything worked. And you're right. I think everybody had a part to play. And you're right on the star analogy. You know, there are some entities and some situations that create these anomalies, and for those things give us unique things. And so you're right, we wouldn't have heavy elements if we didn't have neutron stars colliding, if we didn't have supergiants like flash boiling this stuff into heavier elements, and then we wouldn't have us, you know.
Yeah.
And and maybe us now is, you know, analogous to the tricking and the movement community as before. I mean, some of us, like, I wrecked my body badly for the sport, and I feel like I made it better in doing so. And it's not that, like, I'm not upset about it. I think that was just my role. My role was to be really intense and put a lot into it, and then boom, flash out. And that was, you know, it took an injury. Like, to stop that kind of passion requires a pretty dramatic injury, or two in my case. You know, you don't listen the first time, life will do it to you again. Till you listen. And so, and, you know, by no means, like, I still can do tricks. I just realized that, you know, maybe this is not my greatest contribution anymore. And that's, I think, the trouble that a lot of these, you know, stars, if we're going to stick to that analogy, these hypergiants or whatever, I think a lot of these people struggle with that transition, moving on. Like, you know, I've always been the guy to push the limit, or I've always been the guy to organize everyone. You know, what do I do now? And that transition is really difficult. Yeah. I talked to my buddy Scott about this, and he, you know, he's been going through, you know, he's a psychologist. And so he really has, put a lot of thought to this. And, you know, I don't know if I've put nearly as much as him, but some of the things that have come out of that conversation were interesting, to say the least. You know, like, think about the type of person it takes to be, you know, I don't know the analogs in parkour, but like your Michael Guthrie's or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, the type of person.
Right now there's a guy named Dom Tomato who's kind of like...
Dom Tomato?
His name's Dominic Tomaso.
Oh, okay.
Di Tomaso. He's Australian. He's one of many. Just, it's unbelievable the amount of content he puts out. It's unbelievable, like, how his body is just he must be past a sore stage, right? Or he just
where you just don't get
like, I don't know what's going on.
That's, you know, that's like your Shoseis and these people in tricking, and you know, your identity has always been tied to your ability to produce that mind-numbing content. You know, it's kind of like people in my realm, in like astrophysics, you know, like, they're just trying to look for can I swear?
Yeah.
Okay.
Say whatever the fuck you want.
Okay.
I'll go first.
They're just looking for the next, like, mindfucky thing to say, you know, to give them their clickbait fame. And similarly, you're looking for the next, like, mindfucky thing to happen in tricking or in parkour, where you're just like, the body can do this, you know, like we're seeing, you know, full ins at the end of combos and tricking and stuff like that. And so, but then what do you do after that? You know, like, you have your identity so tied to pushing the perimeter of tricking or movement and building a greater area. And then what do you do? Maybe your best attributes was that. Now what? And so there's like an identity crisis associated with that. And that's something that maybe people like us on the other side need to do better to explain and help those trickers transition. And sometimes they don't want that help because they don't want to accept that maybe it's time to stop doing what you're doing a little bit and transition to something else.
Still have a hard time accepting it.
Yeah,
you know,
that's
in some
the
ways.
key.
You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah.
You know, it's like...
I'm like, you know what? I can still get it. I can
still do this, yeah.
You know, there's parts of me, but yeah.
Isn't that kind of what like Bruce Banner said in the Avengers? Like, that's the secret, right? I'm always angry. You know, like, yeah, well, I'm always fighting that urge. You know, you just get better at fighting it, and you get better at accepting it, and you never really do. To have done the things that we've done, you know, like... Yeah, no, 100%. It's hard to accept doing something less with your body. The community or leave tricking, it's not like we actually left. It's like, you know, you have a friend... I've got friends in college or from high school even, and when I see them, we pick up right where we left off, you know, and it's just like, that's the sign of a healthy relationship in some ways to me. And it's like,
my good friends, the reasons why they are still friends with me from way back in the day or whatever is because we can pick up right where we left off, and we can spend years apart or who knows what, and they're just kind of like, yeah, but we're still doing it, you know, and because we all accept each other for our own journeys and the things that we're doing, exploring as individuals, and I guess there might be some kind of through line, you know, in some of the challenges we're facing, and that's why we are still very close. But you know, that's because everyone's kind of got like a universal, you know, themed path through life in some ways. If you're roughly the same age, you're probably figuring out some of the same things.
Right. Yeah. And you know, and common struggle is always important, you know, like, to use a militaristic analogy, I mean, like, you went to battle with these guys, and you know, it's something that you two understand, or you three or you four understand that nobody else understands. You know, like, road trips are big in tricking, and you know, so there's like always something special with each road trip group that you go to, and you know, time has no effect on that usually. Yeah. So it doesn't degrade it at all.
Well, and that's tough too. Is like when you have some of your best friends are in different parts of the world from making these trips. True. And then you really can't just be constantly traveling to see them anymore. And so
I can't just go hang out in Brisbane.
It's again like, like, you know, I miss some of the people that are, you know, in Europe and in parts of different parts of the world right now. Right. And I hope to go visit them again soon, but also it's just like, and I know that when we do see each other again, it's going to be right where we left off. Yeah. It's just, it's just part of it, of this thing. So yeah, man, thanks for shedding some insight on that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. I felt like I had a uniquely painful exit due to injury. And so,
well, you had to, what can you go dive into it a little bit?
Yeah.
You know? From what I remember, box cutter.
Yeah. Box cutter, man.
With, extreme consequence.
It was it was a very effective box cutter. Just didn't cut the box. I had an injury. I was pissed off and I was tricking, and that was like something that you learn when you're like a power mover in tricking. You know, you can only do so many times. You're rolling the dice more so than normal, you know. A calm and focused power tricker is generally a safer one, but a pissed off power tricker, especially one that likes to kick, you know, that's not great. You're landing on one leg and like anyway. So I ended up landing with my right leg misaligned, and so I had a subluxation of my right knee, and I tore, the list is long, so bear with me. I tore my FCL, which is commonly called your LCL, my PCL, my popliteal ligament and tendon. I had a partial tear to my ACL, partial tear to my MCL, both of those. Well, the ACL is still partially torn, but it's fine. The MCL healed. I had a spiral tear to the meniscus, my medial meniscus. So I hadn't, I don't remember what the anatomical turn is, but it was like
the medials are the inside, right?
Yeah.
So like your meniscus is kind of like this. What is it like?
It's like this oblong shape.
Like figure eight kind of shape.
Yeah. And on the inside piece, I had two tears, one on the interior and the exterior. And then I broke my tibia, and then I broke the head off of my fibula, and then my hamstring detached.
Jesus Christ.
It was my biceps femoris, the short head hamstring detached. And that was the one that almost killed me. So they thought that I had, understandably, torn my femoral artery. Oh, and Jesus. So when we were I went to the ER like immediately, like we knew right away that something was wrong. And I didn't release the video because I didn't think that insurance companies would want to insure tricking if they saw it. It was like a cinematic angle.
Oh, damn. You know? Yeah, Jesus
so,
Christ. A cinematic. I can think of it now almost. I don't want to, but
it was bad, yeah. And so so I kind of made like, you know, a creative decision on that one, just like just not going to release that. And so
that's smart. That's I didn't think of that. But yeah, that could probably
could
it
affect
could do
things.
some damage for sure to the insurability.
I mean, you've seen trickers on like Tosh.0 that like doing double tucks to their back and just like knocking themselves out or whatever. And it's like, that is not the publicity that movement art needs, you know? So anyways, I was sitting in the ER and they were like kind of discussing prepping me for emergency surgery because my blood pressure was not right. And so that's where I was like,
Jesus,
what do you mean? And they're like, well, if you've tore your femoral artery, we have like minutes to fix it or you might bleed out. And I was like, holy cow.
Shit. Get in there.
I was like, let's do it, man. He said, but if we do that, you'll be looking at an amputation.
Oh my God. That's
from the knee down.
Fucking horrifying and frightening. Scary, I imagine, right? For you, especially being at like the prime of my your tricking career, and you're just like, all right, savage injury. All right, go to the hospital. All right, you might lose the leg or you die. And you're like, I guess I don't want to die, but Jesus Christ, like holy crap, man,
as a
that's
zealous
insane.
Tricker, I was thinking, I was like, well, maybe I'd just die because if I can't trick, but
yeah, you actually weighing the options at that point. You're like, you know what,
I need to make a decision, guys.
But God damn, that's intense.
So then I went to my first doctor, and he said, the first surgeon, and he said, no, I can't operate unless the only thing I can do is I can lash it down and then we'll need to amputate. And I said, okay. So that's my first opinion. My second opinion, I was like, well, let's see what else there is out there. And I went up to Steadman Hawkins and met with Dr. LaPrade, and he's the guy, he's the key opinion holder on complex knee reconstruction in the world. And so he said, well, we have a procedure that we're still working through all the details, but it seems to be working really well. If you're okay trying this, we can try it, but you should be good to go afterwards. I said, really good to go? He's like, yeah, you're going to be regenerating the ligaments in your knee to some degree.
With stem cells, or what do they use?
So I'm not a doctor, nor
am I.
But I can explain what he explained to me. Okay. And he wrote a paper on it. I think he presented research. I was able to be there for the presentation of this research. It was mostly about the bracing mechanism that he used. We helped develop a brace for PCL reconstruction, and it worked like amazing. It worked amazing. It changed the shape of your knee as you moved, and to minimize the pressure on your PCL so you didn't stretch it out, which is the big issue. Like your PCL like stretches out in a reconstruction.
PCL is the one that goes outside?
It's the one that stops your shin from moving backwards.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so it's behind the knee almost?
Yeah, it's
like in
you
the
could think of
center
it as behind the knee. Yeah. It crosses in the middle of the knee, but it's the ACL is like a secondary support structure. The PCL is your primary support beam at your knee.
Is that what the P's for? Primary? Anyhow, sorry.
So what he said was he's going to take 2 Achilles tendons from a cadaver, and he's going to wrap them, and then he's going to set them on the sites of the PCL, so where it actually is. So at the lower portion of the knee, and then the upper portion of the knee, and I guess the connections are similar to native tissue, so like the tissue that you grow naturally. And so what your body does is your body identifies that the PCL's there, but there's something wrong with it, needs to heal it. And so because the PCL can heal, it's so vascular that you can have a partial tear and it'll just heal like a muscle. It's pretty impressive what this ligament can do.
That's nuts.
So the body attacks it and forms forms tissue and a blood structure around it, and then begins to heal the ligament, and then after a while the interior portion that he put in dissolves and blood systems run through that. Wow. So you regenerate the PCL in this way, and it was contingent on this brace working. And I got the first one. In fact, it's in my closet, and I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, but whatever. The cables on it are actually cut off the engineer who made it off of his bike. They're bike cables. This is the first one.
Fucking prototype.
This is the first one.
This is Mark 0.
Right.
Wow.
And so I used it and I trained on it, and I ended up working with the company that developed it, Oser. I did some product stuff for them, and I did I was the model in their line and that kind of thing. And so, but it took about 18 months to feel right again. And in that time, every milestone was not guaranteed. And so after surgery, they put and this is part of the journey, right? So
Yeah.
okay, well, so they did the surgery in one sitting. He did it in one shot. It was 5.5 hours. They had to stop the surgery at one point because I was like on the verge of a heart attack, and
Jesus.
it was really bad. And then it's obviously not what they call it, but afterwards there was, I mean, I had opium pumps into my, I don't know what it was, some kind of opiate was like pumped into my hip. And I had like, I was on like Oxycontin, hydrocodone, oxycodone, like all at once, plus this pump, plus like a few other things for like inflammation. And actually, no, that was the thing. I wasn't allowed to do anything for inflammation because I had to have a natural response. They could only dull the pain.
Oh,
So I had to go through all the issues of like an extremely inflamed knee and joint and stuff. And so through the process, I mean, it was months that I was in this like drug induced just haze is what it felt like. I mean, I went under February 22nd of 2013, and I felt like I heard music, I saw lights, I was underwater for what felt like months.
Whoa.
And I just like woke up. I had this kind of fuzzy dream of doing some things and maybe being around places, my girlfriend at the time, my mom, different places. And it was like April.
Wow.
My birthday had
literally
passed.
been a few months.
Yeah, my birthday had passed. I was a different age. I was
What in the world, dude?
I was
more savage.
Yeah, and I was coming back down off the medication, and you know, I fell into withdrawals. You know, where your skin's crawling, and which was really scary at the time because my hamstring was starting to heal, but the withdrawals cause you to like flinch almost, and that flinching was tugging on the PCL.
Oh, and
Oh yeah, and so I went back up on opium, and so it was hydrocodone, and so we went back and forth, and I kind of went in and out, and then, you know, it's June now, and you know, I'm holding my mom's hand, and I'm like relearning how to walk, you know, and I'm 24 years old, and so it was a hell of a transition, but that's the kind of thing that you needed, I think, at the time, to tell me that, you know, maybe I should explore other traits, you know, within tricking.
yeah,
not
I can
just
imagine
what I do, you know?
Well, certainly, like, yeah, if you're, you know, when you're in the hospital for that long, I mean, it's a haze, but even as you're, when you have the inability to express yourself in that domain anymore, there's literally no other option than to start like exploring and strengthening other parts of yourself, right?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that my only contribution was what I could do physically. Yeah, and that was the farthest thing from the truth.
And that's a beautiful thing, and that's like something that has become a theme on the podcast because, you know, having gone through a similar, not even close to a similar thing, my stuff is more chronic than like this huge explosion of an
pain
injury.
Pain is pain. Whatever, man.
But you know, it's been part of my journey. I've talked about it a little bit. It's just, you know, you have to pull these other parts out of yourself, and it's really important to just let like people know, I guess, you know, that's partly what I'm trying to do is like, it's going to be something that happens to a lot of people, you know, especially the people that we love the most that are contributing that extreme focus for an extended period of time in the sport. But like you said, it's so cool, and it's actually a really beautiful thing when you start to understand that, okay, like that's not going to be my value. Right. It's not the only thing I can contribute. That's part of my contribution. And, you know, now you're on a new path, you know, of sorts. You're studying at CU here. Yeah. And, you know, you're doing some really cool work as far as I understand it with space. Yeah, actually. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Sure. So,
because I'm curious to see like what's, or is there anything else you wanted to say about that final transition, or like to athletes out there? But
I think I think it's probably clear why I looked at other ways to contribute.
Jesus, dude, I didn't know it was that bad. I mean, I had no idea actually that, you know, with the opiates and stuff too. Like, how did, you know, when you came off of that, was there that? Obviously you had the withdrawal symptoms. Yeah. That can take people out as well. Like just in so many ways. You know,
I see why people fall into madness. Mm-hmm. You know, like, I think we talk about the opioid crisis, and it's really hard for me not to like feel for those people now, because it probably was a bad decision initially, or it was probably a medical decision, and it's so hard to get out of. I mean, my mom my younger brother deals with epilepsy. And so around the same time we were looking at cannabis solutions for his epilepsy, which have been extremely...
The CBDs are crushing it out for these epileptic problems right now.
It's been so helpful. And so at the time we were looking at that, and I told my mom, she didn't know that I smoked at that point in my life. And I was like, I want to try smoking because what they're giving me is not really working to help wean me off of it. And we, she's like, okay. And so I smoked, and the skin crawling went away almost immediately. Actually, It was really impressive. And so the joint stuff, like the joint pain, the like itching at the joints, that didn't go away, but the crawling went away. And so it made it bearable. I could use the martial arts, I could use my discipline to get past that point, but the skin crawling is the hardest part, I think, to deal with withdrawal. So yeah, it was, I mean, holy cow, was that just a phase of discipline. Like I can't tell you how many times now, like I'm in school and I'm going through a lot of stress or something, and even with research, which I'll jump onto, cool. I tell myself, it's been worse. All storms die, like if I got through what I got through before, I can get through this. This is nothing compared to that, really. So, but moving on to the research thing. So my research right now is mostly focused on what's called the Kessler syndrome.
Tell us about the Kessler syndrome. I got no idea what it is, so I'm very fascinated with modern physics and stuff. So
from a scientific standpoint, there are a few things that you really are worried about as far as catastrophes in the world. There's like climate change, overpopulation, and then the Kessler syndrome. It's the one that most people don't know about. But the Kessler syndrome was proposed by a NASA scientist. I think his name was Donald Kessler. I don't know. I think that's his first name. Is just Dr. Kessler. And so he proposed that if we continue going to low Earth orbit and beyond and putting junk up there, we're going to create an inevitable cascade failure. So the speeds that these objects are moving are upwards of like 4-5 miles a second is how fast they're moving.
In orbit.
Just
regardless of further out in orbit, they're going faster? Or does it matter?
Complicated.
Okay.
But yeah, some of them, yes, some of them no.
Okay. Yeah.
So
I kind of feel you.
Yeah, they change their position relative to the Earth. And if you didn't change your position relative to the Earth, it would be a little more clear cut. But like a fleck of paint can down a whole satellite. And so, you get like little BB sized things hit a satellite and portions of it will shatter. And that now becomes a whole field moving where the satellite was. And so then those satellites can almost sweep out entire areas.
Oh, wow.
And so the Kessler syndrome is, again, from a mathematical standpoint, if we don't deorbit a lot of this stuff, it will cause a cascade failure across like low Earth orbit stuff. Well, maybe not low Earth orbit, but the stuff that's like that we really worry about with human travel, like the ISS has to routinely move around debris fields now. So this is putting like the lives at stake. It's putting science at stake, the science they're doing. It's extremely expensive to deal with. And so what we've been doing is we've been trying to look for non-contact solutions to move debris. And we were looking at electrostatic forces, almost like when you rub a balloon and then you like try and pick up paper with it. And we look to see. The program that I do this through is NASA's space grant. It's a RockSat X, and it's a suborbital rocket that goes up, hits microgravity, and you run an experiment, and then it comes back down. And it's a reusable rocket. And what we're looking at doing is during that microgravity time frame, we're trying to see if we can influence a particle's trajectory. And if we can do that, we can prove that this force can do that, because there are a lot of challenges with moving aerospace stuff. They're non-magnetic, 'cause you don't want
they'd
arcing.
have to be, right?
They'd have to be, right? And so you get like aluminum and these kinds of things. And so we have to find a way to interact with that material, because grabbing it is just really not an option. So
It's just moving too fast, and it'll blow up whatever the hand that's trying to grab it.
right. And additionally, it's insanely difficult to like have a robotic arm grab something that's moving.
They could like maybe chase it from behind and like, but again, there's no
It's so
magnetic.
hard, yeah.
Like, I mean, yeah, that's
So it's a
that's
challenge.
a problem.
It's a challenge, right? And so I've spent about 2 years focused on that. And I'm done in August. I'm done with that portion of research in August. And I move on to high energy physics experiments.
cool.
So I think research is probably the way that I'll go. I seem to like it. It seems to work. So,
Sweet.
But again, muscles that I never really flexed in tricking.
Yeah, and that's what's so cool too, is like I'm excited because tricking didn't maybe flex these muscles, but they set you up for this next, this like what the things you've gone through have put you in this robust mindset.
Yeah.
You to overcome not just everything that you did in tricking, but to overcome that violent exit,
Right.
that is giving you this. It seems like an extreme and powerful tool set for applying yourself to this new domain.
And additionally, like the things that you learn in tricking, I mean, you learn discipline, you learn to wake up and train, you learn to, like, say you're training for a trick or an event or something that's down the road, you know that the actions you take today matter. And that's something that a lot of students that I run into don't realize. And so I'm able to train now for things that are in the future, and I do so rigorously, and it's new to them. I talk to some of these kids and adults even, and the idea of training math after the semester is just crazy to them. Like, well, yeah, you'd go to a gathering and then immediately come back in session. Why would you kill it on a final and then not go and refine your stuff afterwards and get ready for your next class? And it's just like this new idea to them. And so the things that make you successful in movement art certainly make you successful in other places in life. And this has shown up now in STEM and astronomy. And so...
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Yeah, I'm excited to see, like, it's cool to see what people are doing too.
Yeah.
When they take that and they apply themselves outside of it, because, we are still all a part of this community, and like I want to celebrate the fact that we all end up doing another contribution, a new contribution to the Kessler problem, or to who knows what. There's so many cool things that for some reason there's a lot of space stuff going on. We had another. I mean, I don't know if that's just like a different. That's one of the challenges we're facing now, is just as a civilization, is like there's a lot of this space exploration ideas, and also we have these problems that I don't even know about, the Kessler one.
Well, I mean, we're looking at being in a finite planet, right? Like, this is the whole Thanos thing, right? There's a finite resources, finite planet, and we are expanding without limit right now. And so you naturally run into your borders, and the borders right now are the planet. So, plus technology has really jumped forward, like really jumped forward. I mean, I look at the stuff I learned in physics, it's like wizardry, the things you can know. It's really like I'm consistently in awe to the things that I thought were science fiction. They're not, they're real. And so now we're just finding,
I'm like, what's one of the things that's wizardry here?
Okay. So there's a concept called quantum tunneling that's really cool. And so what it says is there's this probability distribution where a particle can be. And if you put a barrier somewhere in that distribution, it doesn't affect the distribution. So you could have like this little quantum box that has a particle in it. And there's a chance that if you measure this particle 100 times, 20 of those times it's going to be outside the box. It's just going to pass right through. Doesn't matter what the material is. And it turns out this idea of quantum tunneling, like it's like teleportation almost. It's essential for the fusion process at the center of the sun. It has to be there for us to have the universe that we have, for there to be life. And, when you first think of, how can something, like, it'd be like you being in a jail cell and then waking up on the other outside, and like you went through the wall almost. You just appeared on you teleported to the other side. It's that weird. Yeah. it's almost science fiction-y, right?
Is there any explanation, or are they just kind of like, well, we know that it happens and we just don't know how or why yet?
Well, we do know how and why, but the English language is not great to describe that. It's a mathematical thing.
Oh,
and so simply put, though, there's a distribution of where a particle could be, and then when you measure it, sometimes it's here, sometimes it's there. And so there's just a higher chance it'll be in the middle, but there is a chance it'll be on the outside. And again, you run the experiment 1,000 times, you'll see it 200 times on the outside, or whatever. One time, I don't know.
So there's anomalies again.
It's anomalies. It's cool.
That's badass. I mean, that's just fascinating. Like, I love that, the way that the deeper we go into the universe, like trying to mine knowledge, the more it just kind of like,
it's
mind fucks us. It's just like, oh yeah, well, check this one out. And you're like,
right.
Oh, okay, well, we have a new paradigm.
Right. So.
Yeah, man. I mean, I want to know about these things. What are the applications of that, if any?
Oh, I don't know. That's not really my realm of physics.
Yeah. All right. Well,
so,
one day we'll blow up.
But I'm sure that there are applications. But I mean, even if there isn't, someday there will be. You know, and modern society is not really catching up. I don't know. It's kind of a bad statement, because like everything that we're doing right now is based on quantum mechanics. Like the way that these works on quantum mechanics. The recording devices, everything, you know, is explained almost perfectly with quantum mechanics, and that's just what, not the why. The why is really hairball math, but what and how, you know, are well understood. And I'm not necessarily sure it lets us travel back in time, but like in Endgame,
right when we think it won't, then we'll figure out it. Maybe it is a possibility, probably, right? It's just like, it's insane. The parallel universes. I don't know, man. That's it's exciting. It's exciting. It's always exciting to be alive here and be a part of all this.
It is.
I'm fascinated to see where it all goes. I mean, it's certainly, like you said, we have these finite feeling resources. And what do you see are the struggles with that? I know that this is kind of a massive can of worms to open, but just like, is that something that you're actively concerned, or you concern yourself with? Yeah.
Really quick.
Yeah.
Go to the bathroom.
Yeah. Go for it. Bathroom break.
Bathroom break.
I'm just gonna hang out for a second.
Where's the bathroom?
Just down there to the right.
Right. All right. I got a long answer for you.
All right. Perfect. Yeah, this has been fascinating. I'm super pumped. Let's see if there's any questions. I posted to the Instagram story yesterday, boys and girls, some questions. Maybe you guys submitted some questions to ask Nick Vail. Let's see here. We have some responses, yes. I'm 30 as fuck, and I don't even know how to use Instagram. How do you look at these? Why can't I look at my responses? Okay, here we go. Nice, we got a few responses. That's how we'll wrap this thing up. Thank you guys for listening. I'm just gonna riff. If you're watching the YouTube, you can see me eating orange slices like it's halftime at Pee Wee soccer.
Sorry, man.
No worries. That's actually perfect timing, because I got to look and see who replied to a story I posted, just to poll to see if anyone had any questions for you. But let's go address this beast of a question about the finite resources of the planet, and then we'll jump into fan questions, and then we can wrap up.
Okay, so finite resources, overpopulation, that kind of thing. Am I worried? Is that what the question was?
Yeah, I mean, there's something we were touching on before we started recording, and I'm just curious to see what your thoughts are and where you're sitting with that, because I think it sounds like you have thought about some of this stuff.
So one of my majors is philosophy, the other is astrophysics, and so this is a big topic in ethics right now. You know, like what are the ethical considerations when it comes to overpopulation and such. And so, short answer is I don't know, but I'm worried about overpopulation if we don't adjust some of the practices, you know, like, but I think it ultimately comes down to a value system thing. There's this debate around something called speciesism, you know, where we give more weight to our species than other species. And
eat insects. Take a hike.
Yeah.
Birds.
So
grow some hair.
Yeah, do something useful.
Do something.
So an example of this would be, you know, I want to save the bees, right? Because the bees are essential to the food system, which maintains us. You know, you're packaging this message in, and we should save the bees. Yes. Like, I'm not condemning this idea. I'm just saying that generally speaking, that idea comes around to this or it's extra weight given to the human species, where we don't want to save the bees for the bees reason, you know, because we should have bees and bees have value. It's because without them, we die. And this is kind of a speciesist thought. And so I don't really know how I feel about that, because humans are pretty interesting outcomes of biology, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
However, a lot of the argument that I've been analyzing is about biological egalitarianism. Does all life have the same value, or does it not? And do we accept this? Do we not? And I think that if we were to give the same amount of value to all things living, we would have, you know, trees would have the same values as a human. There's like obviously issues that arise from this, but if that's the case, I don't think overpopulation would be an issue, because we'd be living more sustainably. However, you know, we can't have an infinite amount of people on the planet. Cannot happen. And
can you describe like how it would make us more sustainable real quick too, just to give life all equal value?
Yeah.
How that might work, because I'm just curious on that.
You could look at, there are, you know, what I think in academia people call the global south, which is, you know, developing countries. And, you know, which if you're super against colonialism and all that, you know, we, as the developed world, extracted a bunch of resources from these places and then used it to build up our culture and develop and industrialize in these things. And so now looking at, you know, places like India or, you know, Bangladesh, these places, you know, the person that lives there doesn't use a year's worth of resources. Like, have you I'm sure we've seen some of the clocks and stuff online where, you know, you use by, like, for me personally, by March 17th of every year, I've used all of the resources with my lifestyle, and now I start borrowing from the next year. Oh, wow. And that's something that happens in the developed world, and in the non-developing world, that's not always the case. And so I'm not saying that we need to adopt a lifestyle like that, but there are ways that we could live that lower our carbon footprint, that don't extract resources from next year. So things like having your own home garden, things like using reusable bags, they're just individual life choices that you could make that would lower it down. There's a really cool website that you can kind of evaluate what you're doing and how many earths you need. If everyone lived like you, how many earths would we need? And I am personally at 4.5, and I'm striving to get down to
that one.
Yeah.
Maybe that 0.8 even.
That would be great. Like the 0.8, you know, 0.7, because, you know, I want my kids to have kids. You know, I don't want to be the last. Yeah. But a lot of it comes down to personal choice. And, you know, there are some pretty strong arguments that say, you know, personal choice doesn't matter unless there's a system in place to stop free riders, people that are benefiting, still living, you know, with a lot of, you know, hyper-consumption lifestyle. And then the rest of us cut back, and we're the ones that are sacrificing just so that they can live. I don't know how I feel about that. It kind of like undercuts the impact of personal choice. But look at like Boulder, you know, like everywhere you look, there's compost, recycling, and there's then landfill. And I'm sure that we're minimizing the amount of stuff going into landfill. And if every city on the planet did that, it would matter, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, if that's the right action, we should be taking that too. We should be doing that. And so, I think that's something I'm struggling with, you know, coming, you know, face to face with some of my lifestyle choices and critically looking at the lifestyle of the place that I live in America and saying, you know, is this right? If everybody lived this way, it's kind of a Kantian response, but if everybody lived this way, would it work? And the answer is no. And so if that's the case, then maybe I should change. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
it opens a lot of more questions, but it's
okay.
also, it's a very good, that's fascinating. That's something that like, I'm also just experimenting and
sure.
I've been thinking about a lot lately. And like, what are the values that we're all going to like try to, I mean, the Dalai Lama just posted recently about how we need a value shift.
We do.
And we need to start recognizing that we all are, you know, we talked about this before we were recording, but we're all in it together. You know, we're all citizens of the world. We're still spending way more time thinking about our differences and what separates us than we are thinking about what makes us the same and how we all can work on this together. You know, I think the way he put it is
Absolutely.
like, we all are born the same way. We all die the same way.
Right.
So what's the this in between, like us trying to pretend that we're, you know, separate.
And it's, you know, there are geological differences and there are geographical differences and there are ethnic differences. But ultimately we're cut from the same genetic thread, you know, and we do all live in the same place. It'd be like saying that, you know, the room upstairs is a different place than the room down here. Like really, if the house is the world, we all live in the house, like you're saying. And so, our value system, I think, was developed from a place of abundance, borderless lands, you know, and we haven't really adjusted to a high-tech, interconnected world where you have, you know, 100 people with modern logging equipment can destroy an entire ecosystem, whereas 100 people with logging equipment 200, 300 years ago couldn't do that. Maybe 200 years ago, but 3, 4, you know, like just even in the recent future or recent past, you know, you couldn't do that. And so, you know, it requires a value shift as technology improves and you know, as like automation and AI and everything starts touching everything. We would absolutely be corrosive to the environment. Well, we are corrosive to the environment without a value shift. So we do need a value shift. Yeah. Is moss as important as humans? I don't know, but I think there's maybe something in there.
Ultimately, life sustains on itself. You know, we eat things. You know, if you're going to give plants the same amount of weight too, then I mean, what are you going to do? Would you starve yourself? Like,
there are issues. Yeah, you know, there are issues with this idea.
And there's bacteria living inside you that you know you could give weight to, and there's all kinds of different things that play into it. So, trying to get that more symbiotic relationship seems.
And that's it. And I think that symbiosis with the environment is the goal. And what that means, I don't necessarily know, like in the details, but there are plenty of systems we see. There are biological systems that are symbiotic almost in their entirety. And well, there are systems that are symbiotic 100% in their entirety. And we can find a way to interact with the world in the same way. We have the technology, we understand the science, it's a value, it's an ethical thing, right? Like ethics are prescriptive, they tell you what you ought to do. Science is descriptive. The science describes ways we can do this, but our value system is what's not allowing us to say we ought to do that. So I think it is a value shift.
100%. And I'm excited to see, you know, how we figure this out, because we're gonna start to feel this global ethic start to be talked about, at least, you know, we're talking about it.
Leopold calls it a land ethic.
A land ethic.
That's what he says. Aldo Leopold. I don't know how I feel about him, but maybe he's onto something.
Yeah, well, it's going to seem to again, this is throwing it back to this Dalai Lama article I just read or whatever, but
he's a G.
He's G for sure. It's going to transcend religious boundaries. It kind of has to, because, you know, it's not really about your belief in a higher power or things like this. Now it's just about what you believe in for all of humanity. And it's like, even if you don't believe in anything, we all need kind of like to agree about like what is the human ethic going to look like.
Right. The human ethic. Yeah. Because either way, whether you do believe in a higher power or not, you are here right now. You know, what happens in the afterlife, we'll figure it out then, in my mind. You know, but I know for sure that we're here right now. You know, I don't know what I believe in as far as the afterlife divinity. I mean, from a physics standpoint, I have a very defined answer, but I don't. What I know is that I know that I'm here now, and I know that I'll likely have kids, and I know that I have a partner, and I know I have a family, and I know I have people that depend on me making responsible decisions. That's what I know. And so I'm going to act as such. And that's, I hope, to find some sort of like moral framework in that. But
well, we're all still on that learning journey, you know, so we'll see how it goes. But like it's really cool. It's really cool. It's been like more and more conversations that I hear, and more and more conversations that come up around the globe. It's just like we're all talking about it now. We're all starting to really talk and communicate with each other just in a different way. And we're all starting to realize like, well, let's figure this out, you know, like what are we doing? And it kind of comes back to that even like individual versus community and empathy and stuff. It's like we're starting to kind of almost as a society kind of transition in certain ways. Sure. From like focusing on ourselves as individuals as maybe part of something bigger. Who knows? I don't know. That's for sure. But I'm feeling that shift.
Down to talk about it. Yeah.
Well, I know you got to get out of here pretty soon, so let me get these fan questions. Okay.
We can push it just a little bit.
Okay, sick. We just had a few, and I'll just throw them at you real quick. Our mutual friend Jay Siley, also former podcast guest,
I like Jay,
asks you what made you so good at all types of tricks. The nickname Trictionary was accurate.
Oh, okay. Why was I wide and deep both in my tricking skills? I think that I had a unique approach at that point in tricking's development, where you were either labeled as a kicker or you were labeled as a twister, and I saw the value in both of them. Additionally, I rejected the framework of terminology at the time that I thought was extremely restrictive in how you looked at tricks and their transitions. If you looked at things from the perspective of in-air rotation, and then you accounted for on-ground rotation in your transition, it allowed you to kind of see some of the nuanced transitions. And so by doing that, it allowed me to go wide with my tricks, because I could do each of the transitions.
You could blend.
Before even a lot of trickers knew that they were there, and I didn't really know what they were called. I just knew that most people were swinging off of 1 foot, and I could swing in 4 different directions.
Oh, wow.
You know, or in 4 different ways. And, you know, I didn't... You fought against the old world a little bit, but I think that it was seeing it from that perspective, that if you accounted for something else and you broke apart what they were looking at, you could see nuances. And you know, if you just did the normal power stuff plus these nuanced things, you had the appearance of being wide and deep. And I think that was key to that.
Good stuff. Thanks, Chase, for your question. All right, we got Dylan Pullen. I don't know if you're friends or know him very well. He's a well-known parkour practitioner out of Boston.
I think so.
He has a gym called Hub.
Yes.
He says
I know of.
He wants to know what he thinks about the tricking community at large in 2019 / the gatherings at large.
Okay. So I don't know if I'm probably the best person to give you an exhaustive list of these things, but what I've noticed is some of what I think that we saw might happen has come to pass. You know, the marketing and the wow factor of tricking has been made very very clear. You know, you can see the benefit of having, like, you can't watch the Super Bowl anymore without seeing trickers disguised, or performances like Katy Perry, you know, all these guys. You know, you see tricking everywhere now. You see it in the Marvel movies. Yeah. And companies have taken notice. And so, you know, in places you have some money being injected into tricking, and I think it's for a marketing standpoint. I don't necessarily think it's for growth reasons. And then you have like kind of the homegrown guys that are trying to keep their community growing and developing. And I think that there's one side. I think both sides are important. I think you do need to have a bit more of a structure in events and gatherings and things like that. But I'm not so sure how I feel about non-tricking companies being a part of it, even sport karate companies. But then again, tricking was that at one point, right? We were the people that were bastardizing sport karate and everything. So who am I to judge? But ultimately I do hear a few things that I really enjoy. And I heard a number of times calls online for guest trickers to act like guests. Like you're working the event. You're not just there to get high and do acid and you're not hanging out with your friends. You're there to talk to the parents. You're there to talk to the kids. You're there to teach workshops pro bono because they flew you out to build revenue for the event. Like you're there for these things. This is something that I really called for in tricking, and I got a lot of flack from some people because they were the ones getting high. They were the ones that I was condemning. Hey, it makes sense you're mad,
Yeah, it makes sense.
But and I'm seeing that now that's kind of standard. When I was just at Trick Different, Luis said it very, very clear, and you could see him policing the people that were there. And he was like, hey, and I don't know the exact conversations he was having, but you could see where he was like, there was a few times where he was like, hey, I need you to go talk to this person. I need you to go talk to that. But you could also see that the people that came out were engaged in his community's crowd. So they talked to the dads, they talked to the moms, they'd move people back so that little kids or new trickers could go and do their tricks. And that's the kind of growth we need to see, in tricking. That's the kind of culture that we need to be cultivating. You saw it in breakdancing recently where, if you're people that throw out the middle finger are kind of condemned now,
Oh, really? I actually didn't know that.
That's what I see here in Denver anyways, or putting down, if you have a young b-boy crew and you're clearly better, have a respectable dance, don't put them down, you know what I mean? And that's very contrast to how battling used to be, and it's very contrast.
It used to be very bravado,
right?
Egocentric and just
right. And so I'm seeing this shift, and I think it's more of an artistic shift away from the competitive. You can still be competitive but respectful. There are some trickers that have not caught on to this.
More of a cooperative sense,
right?
Than the anti
Ethan Turner and who was he battling? I don't know. It was the final battle at Trick Different, and it was very much a conversation between the two, not an I'm trying to best you, I'm trying to be better than you or show that I'm better than you. They were just having a conversation. They were putting on a show, and that was beautiful, really. And I can't speak for some of the other events, though. I can really only speak about the ones that I see now. But I wish I had more context. Studying STEM doesn't really allow you to jump out into other things. However, there are still remnants of the companies working together broadly in tricking, and that is good. Whatever's left of that, I don't know how. I still see stuff about the tour and everything, and that was a vision come true, the tour. But I hope my answer to that is that, one, I don't necessarily know, but two, I hope that these events and the culture starts to reflect the artistic, you can be competitive and supportive at the same time, and that you can be artistic, and that your focus is on the lifeblood of the sport, which is the new people, the parents, the kids. It's not about you anymore, and I saw that at Trick Different. It wasn't about the guys that were really good. It was about the new kids, and it was about the young guys, and that right there. If I knew nothing else about tricking and I only knew that event, I would think tricking was going to explode. Because if everybody did that, again, personal action, if everybody did this, the whole world would be different. And so Trick Different did it right. That's what I know about the American tricking scene right now. Trick Different did it right, and we're about to have TSG, and I'm going to be at TSG. I'm going to drop in where I can. I'm still in class, but I don't take time off. So, but hopefully it's there at TSG too. I believe it will be.
Right so, on. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. I think that's pretty much it. Dylan had another question, I think, but I think we kind of covered it. It was about your time in the Army and how hard it was/wasn't to keep training. It
was hard to keep training. we were like shooting on the range and stuff, and I wanted to just be tricking. It was really hard to focus.
Yeah.
It was really hard to like train to kill people that I didn't know.
Oh, yeah.
When I'd rather just be doing tricks. So,
yeah.
These are in countries and places with trickers. Like, I don't know what I'm doing, Like, I went to Israel, and there was a bunch of really cool kids. I saw Palestinians and Israelis hanging out on the floor together, and that was really cool to see that tricking was like a voice of peace between them. And so, at least I think so. That's what they said. They said that this was but even if that's not true, the idea is huge. And so it's difficult. It was really difficult for me in the military to engage with the violence. I was good at it, like I was really a good shot. And, I was a missile guy. I was actually missile-based artillery. And so, I was good at it, but it was hard to connect with it.
Yeah, so, I'm sure.
I just wanted to do tricks.
Final question. This is kind of a beast of one, but I just thought of it because I think it touches on a lot what we talked about today. How do you think we can celebrate and appreciate and empathize with the supergiants, let's call them, of the world, while simultaneously growing a more maybe mature community-based culture for not just tricking, but for maybe the entire planet,
I think that the supergiants are a product of the culture they came from. Their demeanor and their value system is a product of the culture they came from. And so the best thing that I think we can do to interact better with future supergiants is to build them out of this culture, which you do see. I think the kids that are coming out of the sport now that are the sports now that are becoming really good are aware that they need to be connected to the community. But as far as the current ones, probably on their terms, unfortunately. And hopefully we just I think part of it comes into us as the members of the community and the promoters and the leaders is the value of this supergiant shouldn't necessarily only be related to their ability to do tricks. You should weight their personality, you should weight their actions, you should weight what they say, their message, as much as you weight their skills. And if you do that, you're prioritizing the right people. When you prioritize the right people, that becomes the voice, that becomes the standard, and the guys that don't fall in line become the outliers. And if they want to be accepted, they're going to have to fall in line. And so I think what we can do, because again, we can't change them, right? We can only focus on ourselves and what we want to do. And so I think that it's changing how we value them and where we weight the value. And then being willing to hold that standard, even if there's maybe a business decision that makes more sense. Like, do you bring giant A out? Or do you bring giant B out, and giant B maybe is more in line with this, but giant A is better at the sport than them. That's where you're going to have to like fall in line, or not really fall in line, but you're going to have to make a hard decision and say, I'm going to take the guy that has an abnormally higher weight to his message and what he represents over the guy that is abnormally good at the sport. And from, a young tricker standpoint, a young parkour standpoint, I don't think people really care. Like, yeah, they get all awestruck, but an elite tricker is an elite tricker. They're obviously a video game character. Like, they move different than everyone else. It's still awe-inspiring. It's just they might not have all the like summons and superpowers and like huge spells and stuff that like you see the fringe guys have. But seeing like a dub or like a triple cork in combo or something like that, it's kind of common nowadays, but a lot of trickers don't see that. And so you still get the awe-inspiring moments. You still get the excitement. And then if that tricker comes in and learns your name and helps you as a young tricker, you're never going to forget that. More than just seeing a great tricker. Yeah. That connection with them is, I think, more important than it is just seeing tricks. You can go onto YouTube and see tricks, but you can't talk to those people. You can't sit and have a conversation with them. No. So,
yeah. And I think ultimately what we'll find out is that if we do change this relationship a little bit, the supergiants will actually burn brighter, potentially, because it's good. It cultivates more of the self, and that makes it means there's more to express on the tricking mat or on some building in parkour. It feels like yeah, I'm excited for it. That's all I can say, I guess.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I think it's 100%. We got to kind of take personal responsibility about what we want to see, celebrate what we want to see, and not necessarily hate on or anything, but just don't support what you're not interested in.
That's a huge point. It's not about destroying what you hate. It's about building what you love. And the people who destroy what they hate are clearly cancerous. And, we fall into those patterns. I'm not going to say like I'm immune from that. I've done that in the past, but we should seek to build what we love, and that will grow and take over the things that we hate, especially now in today's America. It's really easy to, and I still vilify some people that I don't like. But ultimately I should be focusing on the things that I love, building up the things I love. And I think that always will speak to the throes of history better, because the leaders of tomorrow are looking back on our actions to learn. And so we should be building what we love.
Yeah.
So
100%. I think that's a great note to end on.
Cool.
Thank you so much, man, for being a part of it. It's been really fun talking to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Wonderful time, man.
I appreciate
Great conversation. You guys will be able to see whatever you want them to see in the description. I'll get all the links and stuff developed. But that was it.
All right.
Cheers. Thanks, brother.
Thank you.
Woo. All right, gang. I hope you guys enjoyed that episode with Nick Vail as much as I did. Thanks again, Nick, for being a part of it. I can't wait to continue that conversation with you down the road here. And I hope you guys are going to be a part of that one too. Make sure you go to the description, follow all the links if you want to support the podcast, or get in touch to, tell us what other guests you want to see, what other questions you want to see asked, what you liked, maybe what you didn't like, whatever it is. We appreciate anyone that gets in touch and just gets involved and helps us, continue growing this out. So thank you guys, and thank you, Nick, and thank you, question submitters, people that were part of the poll on this episode. We're going to try to do that more often. And and that's it. That's it, gang. Anyone catch that Deontay Wilder fight, by the way? Jesus. Talk about a super giant. I mean, if you're still listening, I'm just saying, if you're all the way at the end of the episode here, you might want to be just catching that Deontay Wilder fight. But again, if you follow Deontay Wilder, what's inspiring about him is not just what's inspiring about him is not the violence displayed in the square circle, the boxing ring, but his story and what he stands for and the values and what kind of like human being he is and what he does as champion, and the Bronze Bomber, the guy that goes in there, the alter ego that he created to do the work, is ridiculous. But Deontay Wilder, the human being, is actually the most interesting part of that whole equation. And Jesus Christ! I mean, shout out to Beazle. What is his name? Brazili, but I don't know his name exactly. But he. Let's just be glad that he's okay, because Jesus, Deontay landed a just ridiculously savage combination and put him out in the first 45 seconds or whatever. You know me, I can't not be a fan and get inspired by some of these fighting disciplines. For me, it's just part of what it's part of this lexicon of movement that we all share. So, all right, that's enough of that. That's enough. You guys lasted all the way to that tippy end, and I appreciate you. So we'll see you on the next one. Description. Get in there. Much love, guys. Peace.